So much more than your average book club. This is the Richard and Judy Book Club, exclusive to WHSmith.
You never learn, do you?
Eh?
We've driven down here 100 times before.
It does look familiar.
In 150 yards, perform a legal U-turn.
Have I gone wrong again?
You should have performed a legal U-turn.
Quite.
In 200 yards, perform a legal U-turn.
Do you think...
Oh, look, a dog.
Congratulations! In 50 yards, you have arrived at your destination.
Ah, you see, I do listen.
Home at last. Next time I'm driving to the corner shop.
The Richard and Judy Book Club podcast, directing you to some of the best reads on the planet.
A journey and a half this week as we catch up with the American novelist who has literally seen his novel skyrocket.
The Martian by Andy Weir.
I'm Andy Weir. You can hear more from me on the Richard and Judy Book Club.
Yes, Andy Weir is one of those authors who took it upon himself to publish his own book. It was later taken up and come next year is expected to play out on the silver screen.
So much more than your average book club. This is the Richard and Judy Book Club, exclusive to WHSmith.
I absolutely loved this book. I wondered if it was a man's book, but you loved it as much as I did, didn't you?
Yeah, but I used to. I mean, science fiction's kind of gone out of fashion now. It's more and more like kind of fantasy novels now.
Yeah.
But I used to be a huge science fiction addict.
But it's not really science fiction in the sense that it's all weird sort of space creatures and impossible technology. It's just like one step forward from where we are now. It's like it's one of the very first missions to Mars and it goes wrong.
But you say, one of the interesting things you say is you would have thought it was a man's book. It's because it starts off when the astronaut who's concerned, Mark
Watney,
is accidentally left behind on Mars, on an expedition to Mars, which is all to do with biology and botany.
It's a boring mission.
It's a boring mission.
Yeah.
But there's a sort of fatal, not a fatal, but there's an explosion when they're actually on Mars, starting off, and his colleagues, his other teammates, have to rush off and get into the whatever it is that takes them off.
Into their Mars vehicle, Judy.
Yes, into their spaceship.
Their Mars
Richard.
Earth spaceship.
Yeah.
No, they have literally seconds, maybe a minute or two, to get to the safety of the command module, to get back to the mothership, to get back to Earth, and he just can't keep up with them for reasons we won't give away here. It's quite early on in the plot.
So they think he's dead.
And they think he's dead.
And
they think he's died through a lack of oxygen in this terrible Martian storm, and he's left behind. In fact, he's not. He's managed somehow to get back into the equivalent of a Himalayan tent. And he survives. And he has no means of contacting them. He has no radio, no means of contacting Earth. Everybody assumes that he's dead, so why would anybody want to come back and rescue him? And he does a calculation, and he works out that he's got 31 days of supplies of oxygen and of food and water before he will most certainly die, which means he's got 31 days to get the radio working again. And I say the radio, it's not as simple as that. And he does it. And he does it quite early on in the book, so it's not giving too much away. And then it becomes this extraordinary race against time to get back to him. Is that even going to be possible in getting back to Earth? And through most of the book, it seems like it's going to be 99.99 recurring impossible.
Well, I'd like to go back to his initial, the first part of the novel, which is when he's stuck on Mars, because that's why I think you said maybe this is a man's novel. But actually, it's terribly appealing to a woman because he is housekeeping.
Yes.
That's what he's doing. He is actually working out how many plants he can put in a special kind of biological tent with the right atmosphere, the right nitrogen and oxygen to give him, and he works out how many calories he's going to need over 3 years, I think he sets himself initially, doesn't he?
That's
He
right.
said, see if he can survive. And all that is very much like a woman trying to feed her family, except all he's doing is trying to feed himself. And I found that really, really appealing.
Well, I did too. I found the amount of calculation he has to do. And frequently he comes up not with the wrong answer, but an answer which isn't going to keep him alive. So he has to go back to the beginning of the sum, the calculation, and start again and work out a different way of doing it. And it's a book about ingenuity, really. Yeah. And it's, you mentioned science fiction at the start of this conversation. It isn't science fiction because every single problem that he solves is a real problem that he solves properly and scientifically.
But it would stand up.
Yeah, but it would stand up in the lab. The solutions that he finds to the problems he's faced with would stand up to any analysis. And we'll have to let people wait and see what happens in the end, if he is rescued or if the people who come to rescue him come to grief themselves. But the tension grows wonderfully. It never stops being ratcheted up as the book goes on. And just when you think he's cracked it, it's going to be okay, something else happens on the surface of Mars that sets him back again.
And the psychology behind what happens on Earth when they realise, at long last, they realise that this guy that they think that had to leave behind because he died is actually not dead at all.
The moral dilemma.
He's alive.
Yeah,
and then they
absolutely.
think, my God, how are we going to ride this political crisis? We actually abandoned this first man on Mars and left him to his own fate.
And in the periods when he's not actually sort of within sort of a millimetre of death, when he's actually got time to put his feet up, as it were, and maybe go for a walk in his spacesuit, he realises he's in this extraordinary kind of existential environment. He's the first to do everything. He's the first human being to walk to the top of that hill. He's the first person to have kicked that rock, to have written his name in the sand. Whatever he does on Mars, it's like the first man to climb Everest. He's always the first, doesn't matter what it is. I thought that was quite funny. Anyway, it's a wonderful story.
And can I just say one thing? The author, Andy Weir, cannot be with us today. He's American and he lives in America, and indeed he's sold the film rights to Ridley Scott and it's going to be a great film. But he's not here because he can't stand flying. He's frightened of flying.
I know.
What an irony.
Irony. Irony. So Andy, like his book, is a man very much in demand, but we did manage to ping him a few questions on NASA astronaut Mark Watney, his creation, and life as a published author.
I'm Andy Weir, and I'm the writer of The Martian. It's the story of an astronaut who gets stranded on Mars. Everyone thinks he's dead. He has to survive all by himself using only the equipment that's left behind from the mission. There's a lot of Mark in me, or more accurately, a lot of me in Mark. I would say that Mark is all of my good points and none of my many, many bad points. Well, I would say that Mark is, well, among other things, he's very, willing to take risks as needed, and I'm not. I'm a pretty anxious little guy, and so it's fun to write about a protagonist who's much more brave and bold, and although he's pretty nervous throughout most of the book too, because he's got some real problems. I'm definitely what you'd call the classic nerd. I spent my whole life, up until a few months ago, I'd been a professional computer programmer for 25 years. I just quit that to go full-time on the writing because The Martian's been selling well enough to support me. And my hobbies include, like the space program and orbital dynamics. And I love thinking about relativistic physics, although I don't really accomplish anything there. It's just something I like to think about. So, yeah, I'm just your basic geek who wrote a book about geekery.
Andy, did Robinson Crusoe influence this marvellous story?
I think Robinson Crusoe is the core influence of any kind of man versus nature story, right? It's the classic, it's the classic and first, I think, tale of like a person alone by themselves having to survive against the elements. So in that respect, I would say yes, for sure. It influenced the book, same as it influences all the others. But I didn't set out to write a remake of Robinson Crusoe. It was just the man versus nature element is the overlap.
Judy called this science fiction, Andy, and of course she's right, but it does read almost like a factual account in the present day. So how much research did you need to do into the possibility of a human surviving on Mars?
I did a lot of research on, potential manned Mars ideas, everything from how they got there to what they did once they were there to how they would get home, how the mechanics of the ships work, and the kind of complicated way they have to get to Mars, then get down to the surface, and then get back up to their main ship afterward. I did a lot of research on that. And of course, the details of just being alive on Mars are pretty complicated. Mars's atmosphere is basically a vacuum. It's not conducive to human life. It's very, very cold there. There's a bunch of issues you have if you want to stay alive on Mars. And yeah, I researched them all as deeply as I could. There are a few concessions to fiction just to make the story better or more interesting. But yeah, for the most part, all the science that you see in the book is real and double checked by me. And I had to do a lot of research and a lot of math to get all that working, because I wanted it to be plausible. I wanted it to be hard science fiction. I even worked out. I had to write my own software to do it, but I worked out the orbital paths that the Hermes took to get from Earth to Mars and then back and so on. Hermes, is the name of the big ship that took the astronauts between Earth and Mars. So it was important to me to write a story that wouldn't trigger anybody else's math rage, so to speak.
Now, the plot twists are absolutely ingenious. Did you work them all out in advance or just go with the flow as you wrote?
Well, most of the twists in the story, there's a few things that are just really clever ideas by the protagonist, but a lot of them of the twists in the story are just new problems that came up that threaten his life. And I tried to make each problem flow naturally from his solutions to the previous problem. So he's just basically desperately trying to keep everything working. And as he fixes one thing, he needs to cannibalize something else, or what he does to fix the thing doesn't fix it completely and it'll break down later. And oftentimes he makes mistakes that turn out to cost him dearly. And so those twists are hopefully exciting to the reader because they had enough information when they were, how do I put it? The reader should have the information necessary at the beginning of that section to figure out what was going to happen. Then after it happens, they feel like, oh yeah, no, yeah, I see. Yeah. That's any twist, I suppose.
What do you think, Andy? Are you going to stick with this genre or break out into some other new literary field?
Well, I've already got a contract for my next book. It's another science fiction story. It's not as rigidly hard science fiction as The Martian. It's more classic science fiction. There's faster than light travel and telepathy and stuff like that. I don't imagine I would be breaking too far out of science fiction at any point. I really love writing the stories. There's also a movie of The Martian in the works. Matt Damon is signed on to play the main character, and Ridley Scott is set to direct. And so looking forward to that. Hope that all gets greenlighted and everything. They've announced a release date of November 25th, 2015. So that implies to me they're taking it seriously, but I'm pretty far out of the loop on those things. My only job is to smile and wave as they go by, pretty much. It's very exciting. And everyone in the movie industry, they call me with questions and follow-ups and stuff, and everyone in the industry that I talk to just keeps saying, like, this is not, movies don't usually go this smoothly. Like the process of getting from, hey, maybe we should do this, to greenlighting always has bumps and hills and valleys in the road, and this one just seems to be plugging along without really any complications. So I hope that continues because, I think every writer would like to see their book made into a movie. I'm Andy Weir, and this is The Martian. And I'm reading this short extract from it because it pretty much sums up the protagonist's situation. So that's the situation. I'm stranded on Mars. I have no way to communicate with Hermes or with Earth. Everyone thinks I'm dead. I'm in a hab designed to last 31 days. If the oxygenator breaks down, I'll suffocate. If the water reclaimer breaks down, I'll die of thirst. If the hab breaches, I'll just kind of explode. If none of these things happen, I'll eventually run out of food and starve to death. So yeah, I'm screwed.
Tell us what titles you've enjoyed on the Richard and Judy Book Club. Find us on Facebook/Richard and Judy Book Club, or tweet us at RJ Book Club News.
Tweet us or find us on Facebook to share your views, and you could join us on the next series of the Richard and Judy Book Club.
Coming up next time on the Richard and Judy Book Club.
A first-time thriller to get your teeth into.
Something, a breeze, traffic, makes the police tape stiffen and turn. The sound it makes is snick, snick, snick.
Sarah Hillary's DS Marnie Roan comes to life in someone else's skin. A superbly disturbing debut and a corker of a story.
One you will not want to miss.
The Richard and Judy Book Club, exclusive to WHSmith. For more great reads, why not head to our website and download more of the shows? Take the book and Richard and Judy with you, whsmith.co.uk/Richard and Judy.